At 7:42 on the morning of August 17, 1942, Captain Paul Papy Gunn crouched beneath the wing of a battered Douglas A-20 Havoc at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane. Sparks jumped from a welding torch as mechanics cut open the bomber's nose and began forcing heavy steel mounts into a space never meant to carry guns. Gunn watched every movement, cigarette forgotten between his fingers. He was 43 years old, with 21 years in uniform behind him and the knowledge that his wife and 4 children were prisoners of the Japanese in Manila. Every day they remained behind barbed wire was another day he might never see them again. The 5th Air Force was bleeding airplanes. In July alone, the 3rd Attack Group had lost 11 A-20s trying to bomb Japanese convoys from high altitude. Bombardiers couldn't hit moving ships. When pilots dropped lower to try their luck, Japanese deck gunners tore them apart. Gunn had watched crews burn and fall into the Coral Sea. The enemy was reinforcing New Guinea almost at will, and no one seemed able to stop them. So Gunn decided to change the rules. He believed bombers should fly low, so low they could skip bombs across the water like stones. But first they had to survive the run-in, and survival meant firepower. The A-20 carried 4.30 caliber guns in the nose. Against armored ships, those rounds were useless. Gunn wanted .50 caliber guns, 4 of them, firing straight ahead at nearly 2,000 rounds a minute. General George Kenney gave him 1 week to prove it could work. Gunn scavenged guns from wrecked P-39s and P-40s that would never fly again. The pilots were dead. The weapons still had work to do. He bolted them into a crude steel frame and slid the whole assembly into the bomber's nose. The first test flight nearly killed the pilot. The airplane clawed for altitude, nose heavy, threatening to drop out of the sky. Gunn spent 2 days shifting radios, moving equipment aft, trimming the tail. The second test pilot came back pale and shaking and said the airplane flew like it was angry. But it flew. On September 12, 16 modified A-20s swept in over the Japanese airfield at Buna, treetop high, guns blazing. They destroyed 14 enemy aircraft on the ground and silenced every gun that fired back. Not one A-20 was lost. Kenney ordered more immediately, but Gunn already knew the A-20 was only a beginning. Its range was too short. Its payload too light. He needed something bigger. That something was the B-25 Mitchell. In December, Gunn tore the bombardier station out of a B-25 and packed the nose with 4.50 caliber guns. He added 4 more in cheek mounts, swung the top turret forward, then added still more along the sides. 14 guns fired straight ahead, throwing more than 200 pounds of lead every second. The ground crew called it Papy's Folly. The airplane barely lifted off on its first takeoff, and Gunn had to haul back on the controls to keep it from nosing into the dirt. But once airborne, it became a flying destroyer. By February 1943, 30 strafers stood ready in Australia. Engineers in Ohio studied the blueprints and declared the design impossible. The airplanes were unbalanced. Too heavy. Dangerous. They recommended grounding every modified B-25. Kenney walked into General Hap Arnold's office and calmly told them that 12 of those impossible airplanes had just helped annihilate a Japanese convoy in the Bismarck Sea. The convoy had sailed from Rabaul with nearly 7,000 troops. Bad weather was supposed to protect it. High-altitude bombers failed to sink a single ship. Then, at first light on March 3rd, the strafers came in. They skimmed the waves in a wall of fire. On Kyakusei Maru, .50 caliber rounds shredded the bridge and killed the gun crews before they could react. Bombs skipped across the water and tore open engine rooms. Another transport broke in half and vanished in 6 minutes. Destroyers trying to rescue survivors were cut down while lowering boats. By nightfall, the convoy was gone. 8 transports sunk. 4 destroyers destroyed. Thousands of soldiers never reached shore. From that moment on, the war in the Southwest Pacific changed. Factories began building strafers by the hundreds. Some carried a 75mm cannon in the nose, a tank gun mounted in an airplane. Others bristled with 18 forward-firing machine guns, the most heavily armed bombers ever built. They hunted barges, convoys, harbors, and airfields. The Japanese stopped moving by day. Then they stopped moving at night. Gunn flew whenever he could. He didn't need to. He was a staff officer now. But his family was still in Manila, and every mile flown felt like a step closer to them. In November 1944, Japanese bombers hit Tacloban airfield. A blast wave threw Gunn to the ground. Shrapnel tore into his leg and shoulder. Surgeons told him his flying days were over. He refused to leave the theater. In February 1945, American troops reached Manila. Tomas internment camp opened its gates. Gunn flew in against orders, leaning on a cane, and found his wife and children alive but scarcely recognizable. They had survived 3 years on starvation rations. For 4 hours, they held each other. Then Gunn went back to duty. The war ended months later. Nearly 5,000 B-25 Strafers had been built from his ideas. They sank hundreds of ships, destroyed thousands of aircraft, and broke the enemy's supply lines across an ocean. Gunn retired, rebuilt Philippine Airlines from 3 surplus transports, and flew until flying finally killed him. In October 1957, his Beechcraft vanished into a storm in the Cordillera Mountains. Rescuers found the wreckage 3 days later. The headlines called him a war hero. The statistics filled columns. But the real legacy was quieter. Because one mechanic with a welding torch had dared to bolt fighter guns into a bomber, aircraft would never again be just bombers. They would become gunships, attack planes, flying artillery. The AC-130. The A-10. Every modern strike aircraft carried a trace of Papy Gunn's stubborn imagination. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to let us know you were here. These memories only survive if someone listens. Somewhere, in an old drawing preserved behind museum glass, 4 pencil lines show where a gun once sat inside an A-20 nose, and how one man changed the course of a war with nothing more than steel, courage, and the refusal to accept the word impossible.